Guillermo,
Mark,
what's going on, man?
good to see you, brother.
It's good to see you. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Here we are
Here we
again.
are on a Monday.
Yeah,
Yeah.
buddy.
How was your weekend?
Wonderful weekend. Excited to see you, but you already knew that.
Yes.
I love this work. I love the show. I love our movement. And I love the next topic we're going to talk about.
What is that topic? What's on your mind
Topic
today, Guillermo?
today. What's on my mind is something that we both deal with a lot in both of our practices, and that is the topic of burnout. I think it is on the rise. I don't
Mm,
think it's going to slow down for a variety of reasons that I want to get into with you. I think it's not right, and I want to fix it, and I want your help.
okay. All right. Well, listen, I've been talking about burnout for years with clients because, yeah, it's certainly an epidemic, I think, among particularly ambitious folks. So the idea of sort of burnout proofing ambition
Mm,
is I think a central one. But I think it's also important to discuss or define what burnout isn't, right? Because I think the word is sometimes overused, where we just think like having a heavy workload equates to burnout, or being tired equates to burnout, or having a bad week equates to burnout. And sure, those could be components; they could certainly contribute to a sense of burnout. But burnout is more so this emotional exhaustion, even a cynicism or a detachment that, and I find in healthcare workers, detachment is a central component of burnout. Maybe we'll talk about compassion fatigue a little
hmm
bit later
Uh-huh.
on. But additionally, a reduced sense of almost like effectiveness, where when people are burnt out, even people who are really good at their work, and burnout doesn't just it's not something that is unique to work. It could also affect relationships and things like that. Um, but the sense of lack of effectiveness, I think, is very common among people who are high achievers and really ambitious and really do strive to be better at their craft.
But yeah, without a doubt. I mean, it's kind of like they're best friends and worst enemies, ambition,
Mm,
Because
right.
again, when it goes unchecked and not balanced, all of a sudden a person overworks themselves. And I like what you said earlier about like this defining what it is and what it isn't. Cause you know me, I'm obsessed with definitions. Where people mistake burnout for other things. But I,
Mhm.
I had to consult our friends at Merriam-Webster for the two. I think they're actually really good definitions of burnout. First one I like a lot is the cessation of operation, usually of a jet or a rocket engine.
Oh, okay.
So that's a good one, but unfortunately has nothing to do with what we're
Doesn't
talking
apply
about
to
here.
humans,
Doesn't
yeah.
apply to humans. But the second definition, I like this one: exhaustion of physical or emotional strength or motivation, usually as a result of prolonged stress or frustration. I'm going to do it one more time just so you can hear every word. Exhaustion of physical or emotional strength or motivation, usually as a result of prolonged stress or frustration. How's that land for you, buddy?
I think that's great. And I'm no one to argue with Merriam-Webster, but they've actually done research on burnout where you could have a 50 to 60 hour work week, which I don't recommend anyone having, but you could have it and not be burnt out. Likewise, you could have, a standard 40-hour work week and feel burnt out. So what's the difference there? Because theoretically the time is greater in the first condition. But what we found is that burnout is less so related to the amount of work, but the proportion of perceived resources versus the demands or the amount of work. So if you're well resourced, you could do that 50 to 60-hour work week and not feel burnt out. You could feel really accomplished in those 50 or 60 hours. Again, I'm a firm believer in work-life balance. I don't endorse a 60-hour work week, but just for the sake of argument here, whereas a 40-hour work week where like I'm up against it, I don't have the resources at my disposal, that's what's going to more likely lead to burnout. And so this prolonged frustration that you alluded to, or Merriam-Webster alluded to, I think that sort of defines it right there.
And that's really the thing that we keep coming back to too is it's not really the amount of hours that are being worked. It's the style in which you're doing them, the stressful condition for which you're under. Coming from a person who grew up in the trades as a blue collar kid, um, I've very rarely ever met anyone who had physical exhaustion from doing a blue collar job. It's like
Mm,
once the day starts getting to an end, we're human beings. Everybody's pretty smart. Sun's setting. You can't work forever. There's no good to work somebody to the bone. That ship has kind of sailed. We're smarter than that. But in the white collar world that I experienced professionally, and now me as a coach to the corporate world, the amount of emotional exhaustion just from it almost reminds me of spinning plates. You ever see the guy
sure.
spinning plates on
Yeah.
TV? Or juggling, whatever
And
you
the
want to call
circus,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like people are just spread too thin. And there's
Mhm.
this huge movement in the corporate world of doing more with less.
Mm.
And that, I am telling you, leads to that exhaustion first, then the cynicism and detachment, and then it leads to lack of effectiveness. And so when we talk about these things, and when I talk about it from a coaching standpoint of I'm trying to avoid burnout for high performers, this all comes back to money, ladies and gentlemen,
Mm.
because when a person's burnt out, they're not going to be making you as much money.
And it's so the corporate world, and so I came up in the not-for-profit world, where do more with less is essentially the mantra there as well. In the not-for-profit world, it's the most genuinely worthwhile sector because it's not for the money, it's for the service. And so I think a lot of folks who and ambition comes in many forms where ambition is also to be to commit as much service to as many people as possible. But here's the thing about service is there's no limit. There's no amount of service you could do that is going to connect with everyone. You're not going to help everyone. And so without like firm boundaries, you are very likely to burn out because there's always more to do in service. There's always more to do. And I guess you could say that in the corporate world too. There's always more work. And so in the absence of, having a firm like, no, this is my limit, you're just going to
Well,
keep going and going and going until there's nothing left.
I love how all these things are so connected. I call it, people getting their priorities straight. It's about if you're at capacity, you're over capacity. Less is more. Learning how to say no, which is one of my favorite things to teach people how to do.
Hmm.
Helping people with healthy boundaries, which is basically a fancy way of saying no. You can say no without being a jerk. But what comes to your mind when you just brought something up in my head? Do you know what a triage a triage nurse is, or a
Sure.
battlefield triage? What's a triage?
Absolutely. So it's basically the person who is responsible for taking the patient, the patient in and sort of processing them to move them on to the next step of care.
Right. And based on that kind of process, does everybody get to be treated at the exact same time? Is it first come,
No,
first serve? And
no.
why is it not that way?
You have to prioritize because some people their conditions are more acute than others.
I think when you have that kind of black and white world that's so tangible, that's obvious that my paper cut is not as important as your, you know, broken leg, which is not as important as the heart attack. You get very good at getting your priorities straight and understanding the difference between things that are important and urgent and the combination thereof. But I think people feeling like they have to do everything, that they have to do that word right there is just maybe the
Have
biggest
to.
problem. I have
Yeah.
to. And you're like,
Yeah.
really? Did you take a moment to realize what's actually important and kind of triage your day or your role or work with your boss or your partner or,
Right.
anybody who is in your life to really
Right.
focus on what really matters?
Well, I think also building in sort of a mechanism to distinguish what's priority 1 through priority 5, just a 1 through 5 scale is essential. I have someone, a mentor I worked with years ago. He practiced a mode of therapy called EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, and it is like the gold standard for trauma treatment, right? And he's a little bit older than me, and he was in practice shortly after 9/11, and we live in New York, so we were directly affected by the events of 9/11, and so after after the tragedy, he worked with 9/11 survivors doing EMDR, and talk about compassion fatigue. I mean, he actually developed something called vicarious trauma, or vicarious PTSD, where he would wake up in the middle of the night having nightmare because of all of the stuff he was hearing from these 9/11 survivors. And again, what's more of an altruistic endeavor than I'm going to help 9/11 survivors or something of that kind through the traumatic events they experienced, but in the absence of those boundaries, it's almost an
Wow.
occupational hazard. And that's so compassion fatigue was something I wanted to allude to a little bit. And it's not just something that affects therapists, anyone in healthcare. It could also affect teachers and pastors and just caregivers. I think of our parents are getting a little older, and chances are we're going to be responsible at different times, my wife as well, at different times for their care. People in elder care generally are very frequently uh, affected by burnout and compassion fatigue. Um, and so it's just something to be super mindful of, Will. And I'm really looking forward to getting to, the last section of the show where we like to wrap up and talk about ways of combating things like burnout or compassion fatigue. But in your practice, because you deal with a very specific group of folk, you deal with high achievers, you deal with ambitious people. And one thing, and this is my cynicism acting up a little bit, I do think to some degree we have this adulation with burnout, particularly among ambitious people, where we think of it almost as like a badge of honor. It's like, oh, I'm so burnt out. And I don't know if that's maybe some of a holdover effect from our puritanical
Uh-huh.
upbringing as a nation and as a culture where, salvation through works, where, in my estimation, that is a complete misreading of the New Testament. But in a lot of circles, I do think we treat burnout as a feature rather than a bug. And so, how do you, with the demographic you work with, how do you piece that apart?
Yeah, well, there's first things first. I mean, it's really what we're talking about here is values and culture, and that term hustle culture, and the idea of the flex of having triple booked meetings. I'm telling you, this used to be a flex. Like it's like you come across so. I'm sorry, you don't come across cool when you're like, I'm triple booked and I'm eating my salad while half paying attention to a meeting. And I'm like, you don't look like you're in control. You look like you're
Mm,
out of control. I'm sorry, I'm calling you on your crap. It's not cool anymore to be overscheduled. I'm on a personal mission to get 80% of people's meetings off their calendars. And I'm pretty sure I can do it too. I'm setting this
yeah.
lofty goal because it's leading to that exhaustion. It's leading to, you know what I mean? Like, I don't have time to actually do my job. It's very common for people to have 6 to 7 hours of meetings in a day, and then they do their work at night. That makes no freaking sense. I mean, now trust me, sometimes people are in meetings where they're making decisions, where their input is actually, being voiced, but most meetings are freaking BS. And so, again, without getting too far ahead of ourselves with like some of the antidotes to avoiding burnout, that's definitely one of them. But I think going back to your original question is asking people, what do you really want? What do you really want? And when I worked in finance, there's this ratio known as a Sharpe ratio, which is your risk to reward ratio. And what you wanted was the highest amount of reward per given unit of risk, which kind of makes sense in life,
Yeah.
right? So I've borrowed that and used that now in coaching, where I say, you want to make as much money as possible per given unit of time or stress. Because if you're making 100 grand, but you work 100 hours a week, that's cute versus,
Sure.
make 100 grand and you work 20 hours a week and you're doing something that brings you joy and doesn't stress you out. That's really cool. And so getting people to change their relationship with what it means to be first one in the office, last one there. I'd rather you be effective. I'd rather you
Mm.
focus and do less and actually get more done than be running around frantically.
Yeah, and hard work. So in CBT, we like to identify the rules at play in someone's sort of in the background that are compelling them to behave in a particular way, right? And rules, if then statements, right? if I work hard, then I will be successful. So that rule obviously applies. That's an obviously true statement. If I work hard, then I'll be more likely to be successful, right? The issue is success comes from hard work. The sequence is success comes from hard work. Hard work becomes the answer to everything. And then
Mhm.
recovery decreases because recovery, I think very often we think of as the reward, but it has to be part of performance, right? So recovery decreases in this mode of thinking, this sequence, and then identity becomes tied to productivity because when people are successful, they almost identify as I'm a successful person. Well, success comes from working hard. So working hard now is inherent to my identity itself. And the
Mm.
first thing, like I alluded to a second ago, the first thing that goes out the window when we become more and more scheduled, right? When our calendars start filling up, well, that time for recreation, that time for recovery, that time for I'm a big alone time guy. Like I need some time just to veg by myself in solitude, right? Whether I'm reading, whether I'm watching a show, whether I'm listening to music, playing music, doesn't matter. I just need some time by myself. However, when my schedule gets full, you know what? You know what starts to decrease right away? You know what the first thing to go is? That alone time, that recovery time. And so for clients of yours, do you just get them to schedule it? Do you get them to have like a non-negotiable block in their calendar, or like what are some things that you instruct would
You
be
nailed it.
helpful?
You nailed it. And again, I even said to you before we started our podcast that when I said, I said to you, I realized, buddy, if I take care of my own mind, my own body, and my soul every day, even in little ways, it does wonders for my practice. It does wonders for the people that I'm here
Hmm.
to serve and help, and even my performance on this pod, I hope. And it's not selfish. Self-care isn't selfish. If you can actually flip the script on what it means to recover and actually take care of yourself and whatever that means, whether that be hobbies or reading or extracurricular activities or just not working the 12-hour day you used to. The thing that I got so excited when you said the word recovery is my favorite thing that I'm learning right now is how long professional athletes are able to extend their careers. It's like, who's the most famous recent example of that, I think, was Tom Brady,
For sure.
which was he quarterbacking into his early 40s or
40,
thereabouts?
45, I think he
Yeah,
made
I
it
mean,
to
it's
45.
absurd what professional athletes like LeBron James and
Yeah.
Djokovic and others are doing. And you want to know, and you already said the word, and you're a pretty smart guy. I already know what word you're going to say. Do you know the number one reason why they've been able to sustain these long careers and not burn
They
out?
they focus on their recovery.
Beginning and end of sentence. That is literally what their job is. I actually think this is kind of neat. The bodybuilding community, which I'm not a bodybuilder and I'm not a huge fan of. I love fitness and I love athletics and all that stuff, but the isolating part of bodybuilding I don't agree with, even though God bless people who do it. The amount of time that they're spending now in recovery, like
Mhm.
literally focusing on sleep, like it's their job. Because yeah, guess what, boys and girls? I don't know if you knew this one. The most amount of testosterone that you release in your body, do you know when it happens?
While you're sleeping.
REM sleep. That's right. So, okay, you want to get jacked, you want to get in good shape, you want to burn fat. I know a trick. Grab some freaking Z's, dude.
Go to sleep. Right,
So there
right.
you are once again, like using this paradoxical logic, which is like, why are you resting so much? Why are you recovering so much? And you're like, because I'm playing the long game and I'm looking to freaking win games and win at business and win at whatever your craft is for decades, not
Yeah.
years. Because that's the other thing is that I think that hustling and that frantic energy, I've seen it in sales, I've seen it on Wall Street, where people are literally burning the candle at both ends and it only lasts for so long. I mean, it's quite literally the definition of the word burnout. There's no fuel left.
Yeah.
Why is there no fuel left?
The
Because you're
first definition as per Merriam-Webster.
exactly, quite literally. You know what I mean? Now we're getting back to all roads lead back to jets and rockets,
That's
right?
yeah.
But it's so true because it's not sustainable. And I love the word sustainable. And also there's something to me about when a person's really stressed out. You and I read people for a living. You can see it on their faces. Sometimes you don't even need to have them open up their mouth and you can see if they're at peace and serenity, which is actually something that I coach on, which I'm very proud of because I know it sounds not like something that is right up the alley for executive coaching, but trust me, it lands really well. Where I'm like, what are you doing for your peace and you know what I mean, to protect your soul? But I say this line over and over again: stress isn't sexy. It's
Mm,
just not. It's not attractive. Have you ever seen a person who's super stressed out and you're like, "I wanna hang with that guy?" It's just
no.
not cool. It's not
Yes. Yeah.
attractive. I don't know how to say it. So, I don't know where we got off thinking that this was the way that people are going to be attracted to us, by being
Yeah.
burnt out and stressed all the time.
Right, right. But again, I think it's somewhat or has been construed as somewhat of a badge of honor where I'm stressed out, I'm overscheduled, I'm overworked, I'm underslept, right? But that's the cost of admission for success. And I do believe, Will, and I'm encouraged by this, where there seems to be it's almost like health is the new wealth. There seems to be
Yeah.
this movement, particularly among millennials and maybe Gen Zers as well, where eh, you know they're not as enthusiastic, or we're not as enthusiastic about the 60-hour work week. We're more so enthusiastic about being healthy, being in shape, having time to recover, time to be with our families, vacations and whatnot. Um, and maybe that's one of the upsides. I can't believe I'm making this argument, and I could be completely wrong if I
No, go
rethink
for
it.
it.
But maybe that's one of the upsides of like social media culture in a way, where nobody's posting, them sitting at a desk at 8:30 on a Tuesday night. They're posting when they're on vacation in a sunny spot with their wife and kids, and so that becomes and again, while there's so much toxicity in social media culture and that very thing where we only post things, like we don't post the reality of life, those times when we're sleepless and it's 2:30 in the morning and we're stressed to our nose. We People only post, the glamour moments, the glamour shots, and it creates this unrealistic expectation of what life is supposed to be like. But maybe striving for a life that is more consistent with that, where there's leisure built in, where there's recovery and relaxation built in. Maybe that's why we're valuing things like that more so in more recent generations.
I love it, and I do think that an entire society, which is just made up of individuals, if individuals' values and priorities change, then that of the entire kind of culture and the zeitgeist in general can kind of change. Where it's like, what are you doing, working yourself to death? Oh my goodness gracious! I don't want to end the show on a sad one, but please, it's on the tip of my brain. The name of it. It's a term for it in Japan, when you work yourself to death. Do you know
Oh,
about this?
I think I don't know the word, but I
Yeah,
have heard this
and and
before.
and unfortunately, and my apologies to our fans because it's an easy Google search away. It's so common that there are actually support groups where, quite literally, your 23-year-old son or daughter it's actually, unfortunately, mostly men, like a young investment banker, quite literally work themselves to death. They end up kind of exhausting themselves to the point where they take their own lives, because the culture and the value of being useful
Mm,
and being productive and being ambitious, those are so, and there's really good things about those attributes. It's better than being a lazy ass. I really mean it.
sure.
But not to the point where this virtue, now that's been taken too far, to steal your
That's it.
line, now has become a vice, and now we
All
no longer
virtues at a
have
certain
you.
measure.
Now we don't
Right.
get to enjoy you anymore because there's nothing left of you. You've worn out the tool. And when you start viewing yourself and your body and your mind and your soul the same way that you would view, a piece of machinery that you rent out, or if you ever watch the movies or know anything about the Iditarod, and you've got those doggies that are pulling the sled, you better believe they let those dogs rest.
Yeah.
They feed them
Yeah.
well. They're well watered, and because you know what happens if you don't take care of those dogs when you're trying to get through the
They're not going to be
Alaskan
able to take
tundra.
care of you.
That's it. And
Right.
why don't we view ourselves the same way?
Right. Well, it goes back. We've had a conversation about worthiness, and I think I mentioned it before. One of the central misplaced beliefs is this idea of salvation through works, where no, you're saved by just your inherent humanness and just by being who you are, and of you're worthy of all the love and all the beautiful things that come with life.
I love
And
it.
it's you don't have to burn yourself out to be successful, whatever measure of success you might ascribe to.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful advice. That's
Yeah.
beautiful advice.
But one last thing I want to just mention, because I love acronyms. And one acronym I've been using with clients for years when you're feeling burnt out or you're acutely stressed by anything is the acronym TEAMS, right? So it's a 5-part little instrument that could be very effective. And I can almost guarantee if you engage all 5 parts for a week or 2, you will feel substantially better. So the first one, T, talk about it with a friend, a family member, or a counselor, a professional, right? The next one, eat right. Sugar, saturated fats, things like that, those do not benefit your nervous system. And there's no help. When you're acutely stressed, you need all the help you can get in terms of prioritizing and planning and, dissecting the problems going on in your life, right? The next one, abstinence. If you like to drink, moderation obviously at all times, but when you're acutely stressed, staying away from it completely is the way to go, because again, it's a central nervous system depressor or depressant, right? The next one, meditate or pray. When you meditate, you listen to God. When you pray, you speak to God, right? And the last one, sweat. Get some exercise, get those endorphins going, get your heart rate up. And on that note, Guillermo, I got to go hit a workout. So it was good to see you, brother. Have a great Monday, great rest of the week. Let's circle back later on and we'll keep going.
Great job today, buddy. Good to see
All
you.
right, brother. Be well. Take care.
What's on Your Mind is a production of Oil Media. Subscribe for more reflections, blogs, and podcasts at oylmedia.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.